Hi, everybody in the hub. Merry Christmas and soon to be Happy New Year. We are doing a Training Thursday holiday edition. Dun, dun, dun. We have our special guest here.
Hi, it's Murray, Tammy's husband. Happy New Year, nearly. Merry Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, it's cool to be here talking with you guys on Training Thursday. And I've been told that I've got 2 minutes to speak in 20 minutes. So I'm just here to look cool.
So we've had quite a few questions here at the Naturpreneur Hub, and I get it all the time when, we get it when we're running retreats together as well, about how do you work with your partner, or how do you even get your partner on board in your business. And trust me, it's been a long journey, but it does happen. And way back at the beginning of my first multimodality practice, it was a really big deal, even just like by myself in my first clinic ever, all by myself in this little, one office space that I divvied up so that I could have the reception area and the other area. It was a really big deal because Murray absolutely supports me 100%. And he was so excited, we both, and just like you guys, I'm sure, we both were filling out that space. We were both finding all the different pieces of secondhand furniture or maneuvering stuff around our house to take into that office. And
what was on special at Fantastic Furniture?
Fantastic or Kmart, it's a journey. And you do it together. And then there's moments where you're learning along the way about how to involve somebody in something so massive an undertaking as a business. And that was a really big deal for me because I'd never had a business before. No one in my family had had a business before. And I was really getting used to what that was all about whilst trying to have a partnership at the same time as running a family. And some of my big expenditures, and some of you guys know this story, some of my biggest expenditures in my first year, I was literally hiding the bills.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until some of the bills started coming to our house or I left them hanging out on a desk that Murray started to really understand what was going on in my business because I wasn't telling him.
Or you would ask for money.
Yeah, I'd ask
to pay for bills because you needed money because the number of clients you had then wasn't covering the costs that you were outlaying.
Yeah. And so some of the earliest things that we learnt at the beginning of getting my business up and running was around communication. And I learnt them through communication breakdown. And this is the thing, there's usually a breakthrough on the other side of a breakdown, but we just wanted to share some of the ins and outs so that you guys can get there before you have those massive breakdowns of tears in the bath or on our double bed, not having the conversation when it needed to be had in the first place. And
I've had tears too.
Yeah.
And not only your tears.
Yeah.
And then I think the tears from that breakdowns are from the frustration or the not knowing, or some things we're going to talk about that lack of communication, which then goes, oh, what's going on? I want to know. And I hopefully some tips to help so that people don't get to that situation.
We've actually got 5 tips. We just nutted it out because what we were talking about before is the difference between masculine and feminine energy. And running a business, often I go into my masculine energy to get stuff done. But how much I ignore that need for a plan or that need for being able to get that structure in place. So, hey, to anyone who's joining us, make sure you ask any questions you want about getting your partner in on your business or working with your life partner. When it comes to work, we're happy to answer any questions you've got as well. All right. So, here's our 5 tips. Number 1's about communicating. Clearly, I gave you that example at the beginning. Hiding stuff and a lack of communication is absolutely the beginnings of the crumblings of a foundation of a partnership. Any partnership, not just a business partnership, but a marriage partnership and friendships as well. Where you aren't communicating at all, where you are hiding your head in the sand, is bound to be a spot where there's going to be something that crumbles.
And communicating isn't just talking; it's also listening. And I think what's really important is working out with your partner, how do they want to be listened to? How do they want to be talked to and with at different times? For example, when I want to ask Tammy about what are these bills and how are we going to reconcile them at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning in the bed when I'm opening up the laptop, that's not time to do that. I've learned the hard way. So I think sometimes having a conversation about how you want to have conversations.
Yeah.
So let's communicate about how we want to be communicated with. And the best time to do that is before it gets really emotional and we get a magnification of those emotions, whether it's anger, fear, frustration, blah, what's going on. But have that conversation around with your partner. How can we best communicate with each other? How do you want to be talked with? When? How? What level of detail do you need? Which I know you want to talk about because that's so important. Because different people in relationships have different levels of detail they want about different things. So,
say for instance, me and my head in the sand scenario way back at the beginning of my my business 9 years ago, I wasn't keen on talking about numbers at all. And I know this is a really prevalent problem throughout practitioners generally. We're not keen in the beginning to really harness the power in numbers. And so we hide away from the numbers. Murray, on the other hand, he really likes detail. He really likes, where does this thing come from? How does it connect with all these other things? How does that work within the context of your plan? How can I help with the plan along the way? Like, the numbers thing was a really big deal, and he wanted like the deepest level. And I was like, oh, well, there's this much owing, and I know that it'll come in by the end of the month. So there's a level of detail that shifts and changes with it. Here's another thing that comes up when you're working as a team. School holidays. This is our son. Hey, Elliot.
Hello.
Cool. What do you need?
Everybody. Can you open up the car? I need to grab my sketchbook.
Not just yet. Give us 15 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, good job. All right, so communicating and making sure that you are clear with the environment that you want to communicate in. So Murray talking about numbers at 7 a.m. in bed on a Sunday morning. We learned the hard way through that, but then it's not just how you don't want to communicate. How do you want to communicate? So we set up a weekly meeting that we try our hardest to make sure that happens, and we prioritize it over other things to make sure that communication can stay within the context of that, rather than, hey, here's date night, and we end up having a glass of wine talking about more bills or some other random thing. So if we can keep it separate and keep it somewhere, but that communication, you're really big on making sure that meetings happen frequently, and like short, frequent meetings. And this happens within clinics as well. The shorter, more frequent meetings means the conversation can continue to happen. But if you have one big, huge meeting once a month, by that time stuff's built up, and it doesn't end up being as productive as short, frequent ones.
Yeah, and I think, the example of me wanting to talk about bills on a Sunday morning at 7 o'clock isn't the best example of how to do that. It was a good example of how not to. I think also if you're coming home from your clinic and you want to celebrate what's going on in your clinic with your partner and this is what's going on, I'm not saying that's bad or good because I don't know. I'm not in your house, your place with your partner. I think the question is, what is the conversation that people want to have, that you want to have, what your partner wants to have when you first come home? I think, yes, let's celebrate what's going on well or what's getting us down, but are there some other pressing things? And let's talk about those as well so that we're both on the same page.
So that example is a good one. I remember that day. So
which day? Many days?
Many days. It was one of the days at Inspirational Health, and I had one of those moments, and this is the bliss of having a group like the Naturapreneur Hub. We can hang out as practitioners and we can debrief and we can celebrate in here, because sometimes when our partners are in a different field, they're not quite, it's a very unique job that we have. And to celebrate things like, somebody finally getting off their butt and losing weight, or somebody finally taking your advice and they get their pathology results. But I was giving him lots of detail. I was giving him the blow by blow of every minute of that hour-long conversation that I had with my client. Of course, keeping confidentiality, but I was giving him the angsty feeling that I had to finally get to that celebration. And bless, it's not his job to be there for that, but it is and we got to have a conversation about that of, okay, I need this much detail about the celebration, and when can we celebrate? What do you want to celebrate? How do you want to celebrate it?
Yeah.
It's a really much more beneficial conversation than one that we can have as praccies. So, yeah.
And I think celebration goes both ways. So I think if we want to encourage our partners to get involved in celebrating of what's going on in our clinics and those breakthroughs with their own patients or clients, at the same time, what's going on in their life and their job and whatever they're up to, let's celebrate that as well. So celebration goes both ways. And that's, I think, part of communication. If you want to be celebrated, also celebrate if your husband or your partner or your whatever it is achieving something in their life, as small or big as it might be in their career, celebrate that, because then that creates a space for you to also be celebrated for you as well.
Yeah, that reciprocal arrangement, and that idea about to be interesting, you first need to be interested. And so when you feel like you're not interesting to that person anymore, it's a really important time to be, where can I be more interested in what they've got going on? Where am I missing the details? Because we can get bogged down in so many different hats running our own business. And now Murray's been in business for 2.5 years now.
4 years.
4. 3. It's 3. 3 February.
4 in January.
February.
Details. And
So
point 2, communication. Point 2, you don't need to be right. In this case, I am.
Oh yeah, point number 2 is really big about we don't have to be right. You just have to be curious. Right. So yeah,
it's 4 years in January.
Okay, I'm really interested to find out when you.
Oh, see, prove it to me. So point 1 was communication.
Communication.
How do you want to be communicated with? Communication is not just talking, listening. Have that conversation before you need to. Point 2 is
around clarity. Yeah.
Clarity. Yeah.
Clarity is around what level of detail do you need? What context? What context do you need to have? So I randomly come out with stuff. Here, I'm going to do this random thing. And for me, and you guys, I'm sure as well, you go, oh, I'm going to do this thing for my business. I'm going to do this workshop. I'm going to do this, Tammy said to make this free opt-in on my website. So I've worked on that, and here it is. But they don't have the context of, she said that a month ago. I've worked on it every day since. I had to figure out HTML, and I had to figure out how that worked within my website. I had to spend $30 on that. I didn't know how to apply it, so I spoke to a VA to do it. And But we randomly come out with these little things, and we think that they, like a piece of content, and we think that they're supposed to know what we're talking about.
And haven't been on the journey.
Yeah, that was a massive lesson for me. Make sure you take your partner on the journey with you. I mean, not to the level of detail that you're going through, but giving them highlights along the way then allows them to really celebrate with you through the journey, like the hero's journey of the entire process, that you had highs, you had lows, and then you still got to the goal that you wanted in the end. Yeah.
Cool. I was just thinking about this morning, and you said, do you want to do training Thursday today?
Yeah.
So that's just a really broad question.
I did mention it last week, though.
We'll go to the tapes to confirm that one. So,
again, a couple of you guys are just joining us. Please let us know if you have any questions about working with your partner. We are by no means experts at this, but we have learned a few tricks and tips along the 9-year journey that we've had with running my business and now Murray's business along the way. So
4 years. No, but this morning you said, do you want to do training Thursday? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then it was like, so what is it about? How long does it go for? What do you want to talk about? And for me to feel a bit more confident to then have the conversation and share what we know has worked and hasn't worked, I need that little bit extra detail. Again, that context can be so important, is so important to help someone understand what's going on.
Yeah, and that can roll into our number 3, which is providing confidence. So So really, what we were discussing was that it's a really big deal to provide. How do you provide confidence to your partner, especially when you're first starting out, right? Because you're sitting there and you don't even know whether or not this thing's going to work. You don't even know if you're doing it right or wrong because you've probably never had a business before. You're not even quite sure because you haven't had any clients through the door. But how can you provide confidence to your partner with what's going on and what you're actually doing and where that money's going and what the things are doing? So how did you get confidence after I showed you reasons to not have confidence in me, like hiding the bills? Don't hide the bills. Really dumb idea.
So I think the confidence is really important. I think I know that you talk about a flight plan and you talk about how important it is when you go to fly the helicopter and flying. And when you take off, you need to have that flight plan in place so that you've got confidence for that flight. Just the same way in business, you have that flight plan of where you're going. So I think that plan up front, or a skeleton of a plan, or some idea of a plan of what you're trying to achieve, and sharing that and saying, hey, this is what it looks like for me going ahead. So once you started to share that plan with me, back then we didn't call it a flight plan, I was like, okay, now I can see what you want to achieve, what clients you want to work with, and here's some of those things that you've achieved that we could celebrate it. So I could see there was some momentum going and things like that. I think the other bit that to help with building that confidence was, how could I help you? How could I support you?
Yeah.
And I think we were talking earlier about, from a masculine point of view, there's the, what do you like to build things and we like to fix things. And it's a generalization. So if there's something that you're building, how can I help that? Yeah. Or how can I help you fix that if there's something not going quite right?
Yeah.
That helps build the confidence.
Yeah. And I often talk to you guys about structure enables flexibility. That's my favorite quote of Murray's. Hey, Moira. And anyone else who's joining us, make sure you send us a message. Yeah, structure enables flexibility. And I really feel like sometimes I'm totally in structure mode, and next week when we're doing the planning sessions and stuff, I love the structure side of things. But in general, I love flexibility. You know, I love going with the flow. But to be able to do that in a positive way, you need to have the structure to enable the flexibility in there, to enable the flow, so the flow just doesn't flow out everywhere and then it's all just flat and there's nothing there. So one of our big things was around how can I share the plan, and then how can I share the flow and the moment-to-moment stuff, again, sharing the highlights and the lowlights, but not necessarily everything in between. Yeah. Good
point. And I think it goes back to also scheduling that time each week to catch up, to share those highs, share those lows. And we had a bit of a structure in that meeting, in that catch up, and we still do. And aim for that is that we have a structure so we can flex if we need to, if something important comes up, but we know what's happened in the past week, what's coming up, so that we can share in that and we can celebrate that and go, oh, also here's some bills that we need to sort out from a business point of view, or here's something that's a real priority that needs our attention more than something else as well.
Yeah.
So making that time with your favorite beverage.
Well, you make that environment that makes things easy, right? Hey Moira, hey Sarah, hey Sue. I'm so excited you've got us on the holiday edition. All right, so if you have any questions about partnerships and how partnerships work within your business, how to get your partner on board. All right, so here's our biggest tip around setting up for these meetings. We used to run meetings, work meetings, and we used to have them outside, and we used to do all sorts of other stuff for them. But now what we do is we actually have a meeting in the bath. We have a really large bath, and every Sunday afternoon we have a meeting, and it is as easy as what did you do last week? What is coming up for the what did you do last week that you want to share as a win? What did you, sorry, we're just plugging the computer in. What did you do last week that you want to share as a win? What did I miss out on? So, you know, Murray is away fairly frequently for his work, and there's things that I really am interested in to be interesting as well. So what have we missed? What do we want to celebrate? And so we celebrate that together. What's coming up? What's the biggest challenge coming up? And how can I help with that? How can we both support one another, as well as how can we ask for support as well? So being in receiving mode as well as giving mode is really important. And in the beginning, in those meetings, when we were having them at home, when the kids were around, and or in your office, and we were trying to be all clinical about it, it wasn't working, and we were doing a blame game, and you're right and wrong, or I would perceive that I was wrong all the time rather than him actually offering support. So then we changed the environment up, and now we have them in the bath. And we have our most favorite beverage. Most recently, it's cacao. And sometimes it's wine, depending on what we're celebrating. And we just work through that process of what's the positive, what's the wins, what's the challenges coming up, what's the timetable and plan for the next week, and what do you need support with, and how can I help? So it kind of goes both ways, a bit like table tennis. And I think that is a really, and it's ever evolving. But that's our version of it at the moment. Sue says, we love using a whiteboard to have our meetings together. We used to love using a whiteboard too, didn't we?
Yeah.
We've still got one in our office, and we often plan out our year or plan out the next kind of iteration. So Murray's got some programs coming up this year, and we're using it to plan those out. When we run retreats together, or when we're running immersions and things like that, we'll be planning them out on the whiteboard. We love the post-it note method and things like that. But to really diffuse the situation, create an environment that feels really yummy.
Yeah.
Hey, Diana. All right. What's the next one?
So we talked about communication, talked about clarity, we talked about building the confidence.
Yep.
We talked about picking the times to talk about business.
Mm-hmm.
That's in there as well. And you've talked about honesty.
Yep.
So that's really those 5 tips. I've got a couple of bonus ones.
Okay, tell us.
Frozen.
Anyone who's got kids and knows the main theme song to Frozen, put your hand up. I want a like button for anyone who has kids and knows the main theme song to Frozen.
I think, and it's such a powerful thing that we actually, let's go.
Let it go. Let it go.
And I think having that mindset of letting it go, it's not always going to be perfect, and someone didn't quite hear what you wanted them to hear. We didn't quite celebrate it, or that's the way they acted last time. How can I act this time? Just letting all that go to help move it forward, because the more you hang on to that, it's going to hold you back.
Yeah. So
I really think that letting it go is so important.
And it's not just letting it go once. It's literally letting it go. I had to let go this morning. Like, it's a constant. How can you let go? Like, when something's coming up and you feel funny about things, what is it in that conversation that you can let go of? Like that he's had his business for 4 years. We can let that go, right? I have to consciously think about it and go, okay, I can let it go. He's had his business for 4 years. It makes no difference whether I'm right or wrong about it. It makes no difference. It doesn't change the conversation here or any of that. So how can I drop that, let it go, and then we can move on to how we can have a beneficial conversation for you guys who are trying to get your partners on board in your businesses. And we know how hard it is. We have literally been through tears like that. So in those moments, what else can you let go of? 2 weeks ago, we went on a couples retreat because we are constantly committed to different goals in our business and our life. And one of those this year has been, how do we connect on all sorts of levels as a couple? Our kids are getting a little bit older. How does it work that we can connect like that at the same time as running our businesses?
And can I just say, a real key thing out of that week, that retreat, was closing the loop for both of us around how do we close that loop in the communication, in that piece of information about something which we might have said, or we've half said, or we haven't quite given all the information, but coming back and closing that loop off.
Yeah. And
how impactful that was for us to go, yep, we can, that's a good point, we could do better. Yeah. Yeah, so that was really good.
Yeah, definitely. And Closing the loop is all about having a conversation that goes all the way around. So instead of it being, hey, can I have that PDF that you told me that you needed? And I go, yep, but not actually give the PDF back in a certain amount of time. Or, hey, can we have that conversation about the bills before the bookkeeper calls again? Okay, yep, let's have that conversation, or let's schedule that conversation in, rather than, again, hiding and doing the usual stuff. So, and then what can you let go of? Is he making me wrong by asking for something or other, or is this going to lift both of our businesses, and is it going to lift the conversation, and how can we create, a totally different perspective on these meetings? How can we create a different perspective on these conversations, and letting all of that go? So
can I say a key thing that's also helped us for that is all of our appointments in a Google Calendar.
Oh yeah.
That we share, that we both have access to. So, for example, who's picking up the kids from school which days this week? When is one of us traveling? One of us catching up with different friends together or separately? All those little things. Do the kids have something on for sport or some other activities? It just removes the frustration when things are last minute. Structure enables flexibility because they're in the calendar, and it's so much clearer. I know that at times before we were doing that I would go and book something, some time away with a client, and then Tammy would say, but you knew that we had this on, but I'd missed that, or we hadn't locked it in, or I don't know, I'd forgotten. With the calendar, though, I can look at that, Tammy can look at that, and that just removes that frustration.
Yeah, it's literally communication without you having to be there for the communication.
It's so powerful, so simple.
And there's so many hacks like that, but that's like number one hack, is to have that open communication without having to actually discuss it. It's like having the envelopes left closed as they come in the door. When bills come out, you have the conversations together with them, and you drop and let go of the things that came before that. So we'd love to answer any questions you have. We've got 3 minutes left. If you want to ask any questions about having your partner on board, a situation you might have been in, a frustration that you might have, we've got Murray here. He's actually an amazing coach and an amazing business person. He knows a lot about different levels of business, from small way up to super crazy corporate. And he has really been integral to the way that we have changed the way that we can be so beneficial to one another in our businesses now. Whereas before, oh my goodness, we were hindering our success. And so anything that you have a question about when it comes to bringing your partner on board, we're totally open to answering any of those.
One thing that I think that you touched on earlier, which I think is really powerful, that we have certainly adopted that mindset of not making each other wrong, and what is right with each other. What is right in the way that you approach something or the way that I approach it, and looking for what's right about it. And we joke about who's right and wrong because we bring that bit of humor into it, because it just makes it fun as well. But also it actually is so important to just go, it doesn't matter who's right.
And I'm still of the notion, and I talk about it all the time in the club, there isn't actually a right and wrong. It's just our perspectives on it. And because we've got a different perspective, we can bring different gifts and talents to that conversation. And if we are open and curious, we can see the entirety of a situation rather than just trying to push one perspective of that situation. We often talk about it at our retreats, about seeing a cup from different angles. And you would obviously see it very differently. Doesn't mean that the cup is a cup without a handle on one side and a cup with a handle on the other. It's the same cup, no one's right or wrong about that. It's just a different perspective on it. So the other side of that, I know from being a practitioner who has multiple, university degrees and multiple places of knowledge that's reinforced with pieces of paper on the wall, and I know a lot of you guys are the same. We're indoctrinated in the idea of right and wrong because that's how we get our pieces of paper. And so when we get feedback that we aren't quite as right as we think we are, and that could be even as subtle as the way somebody looks at us or the way that somebody says something to us, we feel wrong, or our fallback mechanism might be, oh, I must be wrong then. And it was one of the biggest lessons I had with Murray was don't necessarily assume that he's just trying to make me wrong. As soon as I dropped the assumption, as soon as I let go of that, I was then able to be a lot more trusting with what I was sharing, because without having to assume that he's making me wrong, and changing that assumption to something, being curious, being open. And he actually wants to support me. Once I let go of that, I was like, oh, he really just wants to help. And that whole builder mentality he was describing, how can I help build it? How can I help fix it? Was a very different perspective and lens to see him in, rather than you're just trying to make me wrong. So hopefully that's a good, a helpful conversation as well. All right. If you have any questions on this, Murray is joining us here for any questions that you guys have here in the Naturpreneur Hub. We're going to answer any questions that you have that you are typing in. We're going to do our best to answer those. But we hope you this was a helpful and beneficial conversation to you and your partners, either now or in the future. And hopefully this has been something that will help you or somebody else. And if you know somebody else who needs to hear any part or all of this conversation, another practitioner or another business owner, please share it with them. And feel free to ask any questions that you have. And we're going to continue this conversation for the rest of this year, even, because Murray's going to be joining us for quite a few more training Thursdays because of his gifts and talents as well. So hopefully this has been beneficial. We're wishing you a very happy New Year's to spend with your families. And we will catch you guys for the Nat Biz Scav Hunt to kick off the year on January 2nd. All right. See you guys later.
See you in 2019. Have an awesome holiday break.
Bye.
Whatever you're doing. Bye.